All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rets. Ben, how you doing, brother?
Dude, I'm so stoked. Tomorrow's the draft.
Tomorrow is the draft, and yes, we got a lot of interesting stories to kind of pick at for Sacramento, whether or not we're going to draft, who we're going to take if we do draft. So we'll definitely break down draft. It's a huge draft pod today. But before we do that, we got to address the main news at hand, and that was actually Malik Monk re-signing with Sacramento on a 4-year, $78 million deal. We were surprised. We weren't sure what was going to happen coming into it, but our boy is back. How are you feeling about that?
I'm stoked, man. We talked about how life without Malik would just be, it would be tough, right? We talked about how we don't really want to talk about that situation, but it's something that we might have to address. Earlier in the season when Malik got hurt, we talked about how it could have been his last game in a Kings uniform. And I told everybody, brace yourself. Like this, there's a very, very legit chance that he's not coming back. And for Malik to not even field other offers, not even get to that point to look at what other money could be like for him in a different situation, and to say, Sacramento, I'm here to stay for 4 more years. Like, that's legit, dude. Like, Sacramento has such a bad reputation when it comes to retaining and obtaining free agents. So this is one of the biggest like free agency hits in probably Kings history, at least the near history.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the way you put it. I think that this was a mixture of like not just a showing of Malik Monk's loyalty, but like Sacramento actually becoming an attractive destination, or a destination that he was willing to take a pay cut for, which shout out to him. He could have taken $20 million more somewhere else.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he chose to stay here, and he's accepting the role that's coming to him. And we don't know what that means. Like, obviously we can debate all we want. They finished the year last year with Keon as the starter, and who knows if that's actually going to be the case. But that's something we can discuss a little later. What the important part is that he's here, and that's one less thing to worry about, because that was going to be a huge glaring hole had he left. So the fact that we heard about the news before the draft, that has to be huge for the Kings, for them to kind of make their decision on what their next move is, now that we know our 6-man is here to stay. So shout out to him. I was really happy to see it.
Yeah, and 100% that, especially the fact that now he did it as almost as early as he possibly can, and that gave the Kings a chance to, like, they don't have to prepare for the chance that Malik's leaving and draft accordingly, or like, no, they don't even have to worry about that. It's now Malik signed, let's focus on the next move. And honestly, what that kind of showed me is, number one, Malik loves Sacramento. Number two, Malik loves his role here. He loves the team. He loves the guys he's playing with, right? But number three, which is a big one, is he's invested on the future of this team, because you wouldn't make a move like that and that early on without even fielding other offers, like I said, unless you were invested in what this general manager can do with a little more time under his belt. And that's super exciting, dude. Like, we've already seen some rumors of players that Monty's been looking at trying to trade for. He made a run at Alex Caruso. It obviously didn't go our way. He didn't get the trade. But the fact that he's able to make these moves now, and instead of thinking, well, if I make this move and if I don't get Malik back, like, then maybe should I have done this or that? Like, it's one more thing. Like, we got Mike Brown off the checklist. We got Malik off the checklist. Like, we're working our way down, and so far we are only a few weeks into the off season, and it's already been successful.
Agreed. Yeah, like, I would deem this as a success, being able to keep Malik and Mike. And obviously we have Sabonis for the long term, and now next up is Foxy and Keegan, and trying to figure that out. But we're in the window hasn't shut on us. We were opening this window for playoff contention to continuously move up, and this gives us the opportunity, at least for the next 3 years, because this 4-year deal, he has a player option at the end of it. So the 3 years are fully guaranteed for sure with us, unless something happens. But this window and Foxy's extension is due in 2 years. So we kind of have this 2 to 3 year window to really figure out what the move is, who the guys are, and when is the time to really go all in, because we will have the opportunity to do that, and we'll talk about it later. But you know, we're retaining the core four, which was really important into this offseason. So now, like we said, one less thing to worry about, and it's a really good feeling as a fan to know that not he signed early and he took a discount, and that means he believes in this team and he loves this team, and that's good because he was kind of the culture setter of this team. Like, the team rallies behind Malik and his energy. If we start off slow, he picks us back up. He's always like consistent in that regard.
Spark
So
plug.
yeah, so we needed him, and I'm happy that he's here. So thank you, Malik, personally, for staying. It's going to make our lives a lot easier moving forward.
Yeah, big fast. Shout out Malik. Shout out King, bro. Sacktown is right behind you, brother. Like, just stoked, man. Just stoked. No words.
I think it was interesting that like people were criticizing Kings fans. They're like, "Oh, they're throwing a parade for keeping Malik Monk," and I was like, "Well, we don't get to keep anybody. This is a first."
That's
Like,
that's the thing. Like, light the damn beam for this. Like,
yeah,
honestly,
seriously.
it is such a big deal for Sacramento, the city, the team, the fans, like to be able to bank on players actually viewing this place as a destination and not just like a 1-2 year stop and then I'm gonna get the hell out of here and go to a team that actually matters. Like, no. We just took a player, we took a chance on a player who was pretty much falling out of the league. Like, he got one more chance with the Lakers and he did something with it, right? He did a really good job with it. And then he got a legit chance with the Kings where it was like the Kings were trying to establish a name for themselves. Oh, Malik is trying to establish a name for himself. Like, two parties that are kind of in a weird spot, right? And both have found their identity in the few years he's been here. And so for us, like, we saw that development in him personally. We saw that development in the team as well. And to be able to retain that same situation and then continue building on just something that's been phenomenal to watch the last couple of years, like, it's exciting, man. And that's why we're throwing a parade. That's why we're reacting the way we are. Like, it's fun being a Kings fan right now. Like, yeah, we missed the playoffs, but we have so much to look forward to.
Yeah, and again, the biggest question now we can turn our attention to tomorrow, and what's next, because there's a lot of ways we can take it. So I say let's get into this draft talk here, and Ben and I are going to talk about two potential scenarios because the Kings have the 13th overall pick in tomorrow's draft for the first round, and this is the first time they're splitting the first and second round into two individual days. So tomorrow's just going to be the first round, and there is a real opportunity for Sacramento to trade that pick. There's been a lot of discussion with a lot of different teams, so we'll break that down in a second. What I want to do is we'll talk about the world in which the Sacramento Kings use this pick. If they use this pick, who they might go with, who makes sense, at least to me, because I spent a lot of time over the past month and a half doing kind of just researching guys and who would make sense. And I played around with this last year, had a group of guys that like made sense to me, and I got to watch them all last year. So I'm really excited how this group of guys is, because this draft is considerably weaker. So it'll be interesting to see, with the unpredictability of this draft, there's a lot of ways tomorrow can go, and I'm definitely excited. So I wanted to talk about three separate categories here. So let's start with the guys I want this team to stay away from. And I had three specific guys that were at one point or another all mentioned to be mocked by the Kings throughout this draft process. And they're all guards, and I wanted to stay away from that, especially now that we have Malik. This was the best opportunity for me to really stand pat on these, get away from these guys. So my first guy would be Rob Dillingham, the point guard from Kentucky, and he's been highly touted for his scoring potential, but he's a 6'1", 160-pound point guard who, I'm like, we have Malik Monk. If we paired him and Malik, I just couldn't see that sustaining on a defensive level. And Rob is the kind of player that needs the ball in his hands to be a creator. I just don't think that he would be the right fit here. He needs a team that he can run a second team by himself. So that's how I view that. My second guy would be Dalton Connect, the guard slash forward from Tennessee. we've seen this before in Sacramento, the Jimmer Fredettes, the Nick Stauskas, the guys who are electric shooters at the college level who can't defend, and everyone wants to pretend that their offense is going to be the only thing that translates and that it's going to make sense. I'm not falling for this again, and I hope Monty doesn't go down this path. Fortunately, Dalton has been linked consistently in the top 10, so I'm hoping a team in the top 10 just takes him, and we don't even have to worry about that option being on the board, because the logic behind us picking him would be we're going to eventually potentially trade Kevin Huerter. If we trade Kevin, Dalton would be the literal replacement for him as the guy who can run off the dribble and catch and shoot at any point. Like, his offense makes sense for the Kings, but he is a defensive liability. And Mike Brown is trying to shift this identity. We need to get guys who can do a little bit more than just shoot. So in my opinion, that's just how I feel. I think others would say, oh, that's a good replacement to have, and he'd be good to have in case Malik gets hurt. And I understand that argument. I don't want to see it. That's just me. And my last guy would be Nikola Topic. He's the point guard out of Serbia. Recently, he tore his ACL partially. He was slated to go top 10, and now he's falling back a little bit. And they're like, oh, Sacramento could take a look at him. I don't want that. I understand the whole secondary ball handler creator, but he is like a point guard at heart. And I just think that his talents could be used somewhere else. And obviously, he was mocked to San Antonio throughout this process consistently. I don't know where he falls. The Bulls might take him at 11. It depends on what flavor these teams are deciding and how this draft goes, because after the 3rd overall pick, things are going to get wild and unpredictable, and no one really knows what's going to happen. So those would be my 3. Like, don't touch them, please. Sacramento, stay away from them. I don't know how you feel about that.
There's a large part of me that wants to avoid getting any guards right now. I think the focus, in my opinion, if you're gonna draft, it needs to be on a wing. But it's your options are actually kind of limited in this draft. This isn't the deepest draft class. It's not the best draft class we've seen. That's not bashing any of the guys there. It's a matter of, at this point, you're drafting for fit. Because drafting the best available, there's a pretty fine line between each guy. You know what I mean? Like, and then all of a sudden it falls off. So when that 13th pick comes around, it really depends on who's going to be available for the Kings. I would say avoid guards. This is personally, I would say avoid guards, and I would try to get a wing. Somebody to just kind of be the back end of Keegan. That's kind of where I'm sitting.
Perfect. So that's a great way to put it. So I'm going to move on to my honorable mentions. I had 5 guys who I thought made sense, and some of them I really liked, but I just feel like they're either going to get drafted before we have the opportunity to get them, or I just didn't see a world where we actually ended up with these guys. One of them was Cody Williams, guard from Colorado. I really wanted him, but he's risen, and I think there's no shot if he falls all the way to OKC that OKC wouldn't pair the brothers together. I just don't see that happening. So he would be an interesting fit at 13. I think he would still be he still has some polishing he needs to do, but I liked him a lot coming out of Colorado. And another one was Devin Carter was my favorite. The guard from Providence was my favorite player during this process. I still would be okay. Same with the rest of these guys. I'd be completely okay if these guys ended up on the roster. I just don't see it happening. Devin and Malik would make a ton of sense together, even though Devin's short. He plays bigger and is a legit defender. So that is something that you could see complementing off the bench.
Great point.
But resources can be used elsewhere. So that's kind of where I felt there. So, and then Tijane Saloon was one of my main targets, the forward from France who plays at Cholet. Well, he was kind of a relative unknown until he started hitting the playoffs. He played the potential number 1 pick, Risa Sher, in a series in the 2nd round, and he played really well. I didn't know this until recently. Saloon is slid up all the way to like 8th, and I didn't realize that during his time in France, he has played with Wemby, and him and Wemby have the same agent. So I wouldn't be surprised if at 8 the Spurs might take the chance on someone who's familiar with Wemby, and he's a legit, power forward build that you could pair alongside Wemby. I
That
just
could
think,
be nasty.
yeah. And he's been mocked to OKC the most consistently, which would scare the crap out of me. And he's still raw, but he's one of the youngest players in the draft, and like that potential is like enticing because he could fit in this roster right away as just like that glue guy. But that's the case for a lot of these rosters too. So I think someone's gonna bank on him before we get the chance to.
Yeah.
And then I did have and then another honorable mention, Zach Edey, the center from Purdue. We talked about him. He's risen, the lottery. That's people think he's going to fall in the lottery, or if he falls back, some people say he'll stop at Toronto because that's where he's from. It'll just be interesting to see. The appeal for Edey on our end is, I think people are still used to the idea that he's like incredibly stiff, and how will he adjust to grown man strength? But he is a big body. He is shown legit production, and he's shown to be able to spread the floor, make threes. He was doing that at pro days, so he's extending his range a bit, and he looks not as slow as people anticipated. So I could understand him as our backup big, but at the same time, there are other bigs that we could get later on, that I would be more okay with schematically than Edey. So
yeah, and I feel like taking Edey at 13 would be kind of like it would be kind of like taking Ricky Pearsall in the first round for the 49ers, right?
yeah.
It's kind of one of those situations where you could find him a little bit deeper. Is he going to fall to you in the second round? Probably not. He's probably a late first round.
Mm-hmm.
But taking him at 13, it feels like you're jumping a lot of guys and a lot of the best availables at that point. And thinking about the return, like you're taking a gamble, of course. Like you're always taking a gamble for the most part when you're drafting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with Edey, like great player. Yeah, he's kind of been, described as stiff, described as a little slower. But his basketball IQ is there. He's huge. Like
Yeah.
he's a force on the inside, right? And thinking about the pairing on the court together of Sabonis and Edey doesn't sound good at all.
Correct.
But like him coming off the bench, putting in at most 12 minutes a game, and just I'm not talking garbage minutes. I mean like at his development level, playing 12 minutes, giving you I'll say like 8 points, like 5 rebounds and like 2 blocks. That's a stat line I would be happy with for a backup big.
Mm-hmm.
So there's potential for a nice return taking Edey. He's got a lot of potential there. I don't think his ceiling is as high as some of the guys that we could be taking at 13.
Agreed. And I also think that like he's going to be good no matter where he goes. I think he'll be a contributor, but I do also think that his curve to the NBA is going to take slightly more time. Like he needs to adjust to the level of strength, the level of speed. Like that will take time for him. But I do think he's going to eventually become a legit prospect that would, that's going to contribute and be a problem at some point. Not anything. I don't think he's going to be an all-star, but I think he's going to be a consistent role player in the right situation.
He'll be a really good role player if he finds himself in the right situation.
Yeah. So outside of the honorable mentions, I'm trying to think if I had anybody else that cracked my list. I mean, I'm sure I did, but
who was? I'm going to rattle your brain for a second.
Mm-hmm.
There was this Ron
Holland,
who came from the G League. Yeah,
Ron Holland. Yeah. So,
how do you feel about him?
Oh, okay. So then we'll just go straight to it, because out of my top 5 prospects that I have for Sacramento, the ones that make the most sense, I had him as my number 1. And really, he's my favorite. He's like my favorite. Like I want his potential so bad on this team. So I'll go in reverse order here to see, just go from my favorites to least out of these top 5. But Ron Holland is like, for me, he's like the missing piece, like in terms of what we need in the starting lineup defensively. Like if you watch what he's been able to do in the G League, I watched like games against the Stockton Kings where he's just pocketing Colby Jones and Jordan Ford, to putting Slauson in the blender. What he excels at has athleticism, and he's downhill, and he's aggressive defensively. He's great. He's in your face. He's really good at getting straight into the chest of the ball handler and then just being able to pick him. And it's just so instinctual. It's like I'm watching. I'm like, whoa, this is really cool to see. There's not a defender like him in this draft, and he was playing against grown men in the G League, and that's something that I think is going to help his development earlier on. His shot still needs a lot of work, but in the G League it was different because the Ignite is a completely different scenario. There's no consistency there. It's a revolving door of players. That's how it was. So they never had a team that really meshed, and he was the best player last year after Scoot left the year prior, and he played with Scoot too. So he's been in the G League for 2 years now. Um, and I just see the potential there. And his shot, he has a nice looking shot. He just takes a little bit too long to set. And he doesn't look to shoot threes. But I also think that if you pair him with this coaching staff, with Luke Laux, who is an incredible shooting coach, let's look at what he's done with Foxy. I believe that he's the perfect Mike Brown player, just the guy who can grab a rebound and just dart down the floor, just like Fox. Like you can see that burst, and that's something that I could limit the spacing, but I can just see a world where our starting, five is De'Aaron Fox, Keon Ellis, Ron Holland, Keegan Murray for that four, and those guys can switch on to anybody, play on anybody. All of a sudden, our defense just looks so much better, and that's something for me that, like, fit wise, I want that kind of attitude. I want to accept this defensive identity that we were adopting towards the end of the year, because I saw a different style from this team, a different level of physicality that I think would benefit us for a playoff run next year. And that's where I think Ron Holland fits.
That's a really great point. So I'm going to ask you if off the top of your head, because I was trying to remember mock draft wise, would taking him at 13, do you think he's going to go earlier? Is it possible he'll be there? Would it be too early to take him?
No, so for him, he's one of the more unpredictable ones, because he was coming into, I would say, entering the 2023 season, so entering last year, he was the number one rated prospect in this whole class. So he was a highly touted prospect, but I think they saw his production in the G League. They're like, oh, he's not shooting that great, and hasn't happened yet. But man, like, you can just buy into his defense and then just hope that the offense comes along. But he's the kind of guy who just makes the right plays, and like, he wants to win there. And his range is all over the place. He can go as high as 8 to the Spurs, but I've seen him fall back past us. So like 14, 15. So
Okay.
His range is the greatest, but I also think that he's more likely to get drafted earlier, before 13 than after 13. If he falls to us at 13, we better take him. Like, I wouldn't let him go anywhere else. But he's been mocked consistently to Utah, or Chicago. So it depends on, what those teams decide to do. And
Chicago makes sense now, especially with Caruso gone.
Yeah, and having Giddey there too, so they have that size that would help them too with Kobe. Like, they'd be a bigger team if that was the case. But also I could see Chicago going Dillingham too. It like depends. That's the thing with this draft, right? Like, especially around that like 7 to 15 range, it's kind of like pick your flavor, like, because you're gonna have a ton of different options here.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but for Ron Holland was my guy. Like, I kind of adopted him as like the guy I want to see succeed the most. I'm going to keep a close eye on him after the draft if we don't end up with him. So he's my number one for the Kings specifically.
No, that's fire. All right, so who's your number 2?
So my number 2, I got to remember how I did this right. It would be Khalil Ware, the center from Indiana. Now, when I took my top 5, I took this approach. I took who would be the best fit, and now that we signed Malik, what are the best forwards, centers, or wing players that like kind of make the most sense? And Khalil Ware is a very, like, he looks and plays like the modern NBA big. He's 7 feet. He's only about 240 pounds right now. He still needs to bulk up a little bit. And he's a sophomore. He played poorly at Oregon his freshman year, transferred to Indiana, and really blossomed. He has the 3-level scoring. He has incredible footwork in the post. He makes some friggin' tough shots in the post. He has this like unblockable fadeaway post shot that pissed a lot of defenders off when you watch the games, and he makes an impact defensively. He would be such a cool help defender to have because he's so springy. He has that quick second jump. And he averaged 9.9 boards, so he's active on the boards. So the question with him coming into this draft was apparently his motor. People were like, "Oh, is he really passionate about it?" And I think in the right situation like the Kings, you're gonna see a level of passion out of him that we'd be able to get. And he's also like a Brook Lopez, Miles Turner style archetype where he can spread the floor. He has a very fluid looking shot. He can hit threes. He shot 40% from three last year. So for a big man, he was just extremely consistent. And although the Indiana team struggled, he played against good competition too. So he's putting up good numbers against good competition. And he'll be able to use kind of like it'll look like I think in a reduced role, a specific role, he would excel because we just ask him to like, hey, make your threes or rebound with effort and be a good defender. And he can do all those things if given the right kind of tutelage. So I really liked him as a fit next to Domas, as well as like you could put him alone as the backup center and he would fit just fine.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're gonna put a big man out there like that with Domas, he's got to be able to space the court like that. Because I mean, when you have Domas, the way he operates, like everybody's got to be spaced out. That's how your offense is going to be as lethal as it is running through Sabonis. So that's enticing in and of itself. And then yeah, the defensive end of it, you know, you talking about like pick your poison kind of thing with him. That sounds nice. Not gonna lie.
And it's affordable. And like we tried the cheap backup big option, and we've left with Len, McGee, who have like nice little flashes, but it'd be nice to have a consistent player who can come in and make a difference, a la like Derek Lively for the Mavs. Like you just know what you're going to get out of him. And he's a really good connective passer. He saw a lot of double teams, so he learned how to pass out of the post. He can handle those kind of things. So we could come up with a few different things offensively for him, and he's a good lob threat too. That's always nice to have, especially if you're pairing him with Malik off the bench. So
I was just thinking that, yeah. That's electric.
So I liked him a lot, and he grew on me. But his range is interesting. He was mocked to us in the past couple mock drafts that I saw, but I also saw him as far back as 20. So he has a wide range to him too. But my third guy, who falls under the same category, he's a big man. He was mocked a little later, but he has that kind of that plug and play style, and that would be Deron Holmes, the center from Dayton. Dayton, we got Curry. No, that's Davidson, but Dayton is a smaller school, Atlantic 10. You're playing against slightly lesser competition, but they made a name for themselves in the tournament. He really stood out. He's 6'10", about 250. He has a nice bounce to him. He averaged like 2.5 blocks a game. Like he has that two-way capability. He's a little bit more stiff, kind of, a little bit more of like a hulking big. But he's incredibly smooth, and he's not afraid to put the ball on the floor, and he'll drive from the top of the key to the basket, no problem. And he's an extremely good help defender, and he has good strength, and he can spread the floor too. So there is a world where you can see him and Domas together. It would be slightly more clunkier, just from the style of play that he plays, but you could put him and Domas at the same time and it would still work. And I think he like I said, he just doesn't look as smooth, but the results and the production is there. And I really do believe that in a more spaced out environment for him with better shooters, I think he's going to excel.
I can see it. Yeah.
So, and he's been mocked as far back as like 28th to Denver. Like he's gotten that far back, but he's gotten a promise in the first round. And I'm pretty sure it was Denver. So if he falls to Denver, Denver said they're taking him, was the report. But I think someone will take a shot at him beforehand. It'll just be a matter of the right team. So for me, 13 would be kind of a reach, but fit wise with his experience, it also is kind of like the kind of player Monty would take. Like he is an experienced, he's a junior, so he's an older player, and he was extremely productive, especially in the big moments too. So like that's something that Monty likes, his attitude. You'll take a reach for him if you don't think that there's a backup option out there that makes more sense.
Yeah, and Monty definitely has a type. He likes to draft guys with a little more experience, and also guys who like he likes to draft for that fit, but he also does pay attention to the best available. And honestly, he hasn't really missed, so I trust whatever he's going to do. If he's on the board there and he feels like it's best, take him.
Right, and that's kind of also something I considered when I made this top 5. Like Ron Holland is my favorite, but I also think that like I don't know if Monty would pull the trigger on him because there is a lot of pressure to win now, and there's no guarantee that spending time on an 18-year-old would makes sense for him and for the team. But gosh, like you just got 2 extra years of Malik to kind of take that chance. You got to take some risks here and there, and he just he projects as that level of project. So the other guys I had behind him say, hey, I have a little more experience and production, and it makes sense for Monty to take them now. Especially this next guy, my number 4 guy, was Tristan Da Silva, from the forward from Colorado, who played alongside Cody Williams, and then Cody went down with an injury during the year, and Tristan was basically the focal point of this offense. And he gave me, when I watched his stuff, Keegan Murray highlights all day.
Yes.
Like, just literally, like, the demeanor, the way they play, they're very fundamental. He's excellent from 3. He is a better defender than people give him credit for. Slightly sneaky athletic, but still not the most athletic guy. But it's like Keegan Murray, Jaime Jaquez style guy. Like, you just know he can come in and contribute right away, and his style of play makes a ton of sense. He shot about 40% from 3, and he knew how to handle the load for Colorado, and was a huge reason they made it as far as they did in the tournament. So I really liked him, and he's been mocked anywhere between 14 to about 20-ish, but he's going to be in the teens, and someone's going to nab him.
Yeah, 100%. And I really liked what I saw from him. And I love that you made that comparison to Keegan, because I totally saw that too.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of good things about him. I watched a little bit of tape on him. I would not be mad at all if we went and got him, Tristan.
Right, because like for the like Holland and Da Silva, you can literally slide them in to the starting role right away, and they'd be fine. And that's the kind of player that, if we can't get that via trade or in free agency, like, then the draft, like, listen, this draft might be weak by some standards, but what that normally just means is that the top of the draft is not as premium as they would like. That does not mean that there aren't good players in this draft. So
very true.
So if you're going to get a quality role player for the cheap, you might as well get one that can come in right away and make a difference. And I think Da Silva would be a really good one for that. And again, his age, his maturity, he is one of the older players in the draft. He's 23, but that doesn't scare Monty. If he fits right away with this team, that's all that matters. He'll still be young on this team. So
yeah, definitely.
And then my last guy is one who's been mocked to us consistently, and he is that, I guess he's like the happy medium between a true wing / forward and a guard, and that would be Jacoby Walter, the guard from Baylor. And the only reason I liked his tape, and he was a freshman, so he's a young guy, so that's another thing you're banking on too. He is a plug and play option. He has a lot of intensity and energy to him. He's great off of DHOs. He has that catch and shoot. Like, he has a very translatable shot. It looks extremely fluid. The one knock on him is that his ball handling just needs a little bit of work. And he just needs to adjust to staying in front of his man more consistently. But he was extremely aggressive in the passing lanes and was a decent defender. And that's something you can teach as he gets older. He has all the measurables that you want out of a guard. And off the bench, him and Malik would be electric together. But that's the thing, when you go for someone like him and you go for a guard, and that's the case whether you get Devin Carter or any of these guards in this draft, they're going to be your backup. And that's something with like these centers, you could mix them in with Domas at the same time, or the wings, you can plug them in right away instead of Harrison Barnes. So that's something that, like, if you're going to go down the Jacob Walter path, he's going to be our next guy off the bench as well. But then, what about Colby Jones? What about these guys who we've invested in? Though that's the only thing that's deterring me. But Walter has been consistently mocked to us in multiple mock drafts, so I felt like it was necessary to throw him up here. And fit wise, it makes sense. And I would prefer him over someone like Connect because of his athletic ability and his ability to defend over some of these other guys.
Well, that's a pretty nice list. I'm not gonna lie. I think the problem for me is we're in a win now state. And you talked about the window. Like, there's a window for every team. The window for the Sacramento Kings right now is anywhere between, I want to say, 3 to 6 years. Okay.
Right.
The question is, though, any of those guys, like, would they be able to impact a championship team in the next 3 to 6 years? Obviously, we don't know. But what we do know is there are guys across the NBA who have put in time, put in work, made the playoffs, have experience at this level, who could give the Sacramento Kings the edge and give them the next step towards contention. So I want to kind of transition here if you're ready for it.
Totally ready. Let's hit it.
I personally, Marcos, I don't want to draft anybody at number one at in the first round at pick 13. I don't want to draft anybody. And the reason being is we need to use that pick and a couple more players to go get the next guy that'll put us over the hump that we're trying to get over right now. And obviously the Kings missed the playoffs last year. That sucked. It is what it is. It was a testament to standing pat and not making any big moves last year. It was a gamble. It was a gamble in everything you do as a GM. Monty took a gamble, didn't pay off. If you stand pat this year, you're not going to have a job. And so the reality of it is there is going to be a move. And I firmly believe that the 13th pick will be traded tomorrow. Now, I have a couple guys that I have on my list that I would love to see get traded to Sacramento. Now, unfortunately, Marcos, one of those guys is Mikal Bridges, who was just traded.
What?
So real quick. Listen to this crazy stuff, okay?
Mikal Bridges just got traded.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No,
listen to this, okay?
No. I'm so nervous.
The Brooklyn Nets have agreed in principle on a trade to send Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks for Bojan Bogdanovic, 4 unprotected first-round picks, a protected first-round pick via the Bucks, an unprotected pick swap, and a second-rounder.
Oh my God, that's
the Knicks
insane.
are sending 4 unprotected picks, 2025, 2027, 29, 31, a 2025 protected pick, which is Milwaukee's first round, a 2028 unprotected pick swap. Like, this is a mess, all for Mikal Bridges. So,
dude, that's a win now move, if anything. All of a sudden, the Villanova boys are back together. That's insane.
Right.
All 4 of them. What the?
So
wow,
they just got loaded, which is good for them.
They kept OG and Randall. Wow. This Knicks team just got way scarier.
They got really good.
Wow, that's crazy.
So he was on my list of guys I wanted. However, I had a feeling that it would take a lot to get him.
4 first rounders, apparently.
And and it took a ton to get him. So that's not gonna happen.
That's
so
crazy.
Let me move on here.
Shout out
you
Mikal.
Talked about shout out to Mikal, man. You're worth something, apparently.
Yeah, jeez.
You've been preaching about this guy for a solid probably year plus, wanting this guy on the team
since last free agency.
Yeah. So Kyle Kuzma, I think that there's a really, really, really good chance that the Kings trade the 13th pick and maybe just like a couple late second rounders or something, future drafts to get Kuz, because I don't think it's going to take that much to get Kuz. He's probably who's going to cost the least in terms of what you got to give up.
For sure.
So, I have my pros and cons with Kuz. Kuz is a great player. He's shown a lot of growth, mentally and physically. But he definitely still has his moments, and he's been on a Washington Wizards team that is full of just, disorganization, and malpractice, which the Kings are very familiar with. Right. But when you talk about win now moves, like, you want somebody with experience. Personally, like, I would want somebody who has deep playoff run experience. And I don't know if you get a lot of that with Kuz, right? So
the only argument I have to that is that he was a part of a championship team, and he was a part of the most interesting championship team. Obviously, it was the bubble. But I don't discount that. I think, if anything, that just shows, the Lakers bubble title is a different subject. But I mean, I don't think that title is any less than anything else given the situation of everything. And I also think when it comes to Kuzma, his best years have come when the Lakers had the most success. That was his time. Like, obviously, statistically, he put up great numbers in Washington, better than he's ever had before. But that's the product of being the number one option on a garbage team. Where for me, what really attracts me to Kuzma, not just his skill set, but it's his contract as well. And we've talked about it. Like any of these other guys that we're gonna mention here, I'm not gonna drop them just yet, but like his contract average is 22.5 million throughout the remainder of his contract. That is that's insane for a player of his caliber. And that's the thing, like when he signed a 4-year $100 million contract last year. That was a nice looking contract last year, and now this year and the years moving forward, it's going to look even better. And that's an affordable contract, which it would take, like you mentioned, a pick, probably a second round pick in the future, or however that is, and then we'd probably salary match with like Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter. Either one of those guys average the same amount. We would have. I don't think we'd be able to pull off a Kuzma trade without sending one of them to balance out the salaries.
Agreed.
But I agree. I think for me, it's not just a cost-effective thing. I think that people want to criticize his inefficiency in Washington, and again, he's playing with B team players, and he had to create a lot out of nothing. And I think that if he's given a more consistent role, a smaller role, his efficiency will go up, and he checks a lot of the boxes for the kind of wing that we're looking for. And he's shown that he can play with literally the best. And, he's handled LeBron and AD at their peak, and they were able to win a title together. And I don't think that can be ignored. That level of experience, he has more titles than anybody on our team outside of Harrison Barnes. So
and that's 100%. And that's the part for me that gets me excited is when I think about when he was putting up some of his best numbers, it was when he wasn't the number 1-2 option. And on the Kings, I think he's number 3 option.
Yeah.
Still. And I like that. Because I think Kuz will feel a lot better in a number 3 spot. And I mean, we look at, what Malik's done with a wide open floor and a wide open door, like, go do your thing, like figure out your identity kind of thing. Not saying that Kuz doesn't have one, but guys get a little bit more reins here on the Kings while the Kings are trying to get to a place that, is unfamiliar ground for them, right? And this could be a great opportunity for Kuz to really find his true identity and maybe his final landing spot. Who knows? So
yeah,
he's definitely enticing. I love his contract, and I do really like the idea of him pairing with Foxy and Domas. But we'll see if that happens. If not, I want to stay away from this guy. But he's also one of my favorite players in the league, and the Kings have been linked to talking with this team about this guy already this offseason. And there's a possibility we trade for him, and that's Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's contract is horrendous. Okay. He has 3 years left of his contract, making $178 million in those 3 years.
3 years.
And
compare that to Kuzma. Kuzma has 3 years, $66 million left for comparison's sake.
So that puts it in perspective for sure. And I want to put it out there, like, he's injury prone. He's a little bit on the older side. He's not old by any means, but he has struggled to stay on a court consistently. However, he's been a number 1 or 2 option for 4 or 5 years now. And, basically since his Minnesota days. And you kind of got to look at that and go, well, what would he be here? And then are you willing to take a lessened role? Then you're like, okay, if you're the 3rd option, why are you still making $178 million? So, there's things to consider, especially with Foxy and his potential, extension coming up. Like, there's going to be a lot of money thrown at Foxy if he's going to stay here in SAC. And to transition for a second, if Fox makes All NBA next year, or he's makes the all defensive team, rather not all defensive. If he's defensive player of the year or MVP, he has a chance to make like $350 million.
Yeah.
He has a chance to get that veteran contract with the Kings, which is a 5-year, 350 mil.
Yeah.
Which would make him like the highest paid NBA player for a short period of time, but ever. And that's a lot of the reason why Foxy's not wanting to sign that extension right now, because why the heck would I leave, $100 million out there on the table? That is stupid. So Kings fans, calm down. There's a reason he's doing this. It also makes sense that he's playing the field and he's looking like, all right, what are you guys going to throw around me? What are you guys going to do to help me and this team get to the next level? So does Zach LaVine do that for me? No. Does his money do that for me? No. Do I love him and his play? Yeah, I love Zach. But no, man, I can't see a scenario, but it's possible because they talk about those win now moves. We've been linked to talking with them, so we'll see.
I think for me, if I'm the Bulls, especially after the Caruso trade, after what they were able to do, if I'm the Bulls, I think the strap might just be to keep LaVine until the trade deadline and show teams that he can still, that he's capable again. You need to show the product on the floor again, and he hasn't played over 70 games since 2015. That's almost 10 years. Dude can't stay on the floor, and that's something that's just hard to buy into when there's that much money involved. So yeah, that's how I feel.
No, it's 100% on point. So I'm going to move on to two more guys. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but the next one is probably unlikely to happen, but I would love to see him on this team, and that's Brandon Ingram. Now, we've talked about the pairing of Brandon Ingram and Zion in New Orleans, and there's numbers that back up the idea that on the court together, they're not a great fit. But it's also hard to see a scenario where New Orleans goes, yeah, this isn't working. Let's trade Ingram. Or, it's just, it doesn't seem likely. And I believe that it would take a lot for the Kings to actually make that trade happen. And I'm nervous to see what that would look like, but it's a win now move. And honestly, if we bring him in and it doesn't take any of our core three, like, it could benefit us, honestly.
So would you, if the package involved Keon, would you do it?
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Because I don't know if I would.
If it involved Keon, I would do it. Yes, absolutely. Because I think the biggest thing that this team is missing, like, obviously it's defense, right? But during the Pelicans game last year, any of the six, pick it, okay? But especially the sixth one, I was on this trend, noticing this trend going into the game and then during the game of we can't buy a bucket sometimes. Yeah. And I continuously was saying in our group chats and when we'd hang out and on this pod, like, there's a guy who gets that bucket for the Pelicans when it matters. It's Brandon Ingram.
Yeah.
And to stop bleeding is something that the Kings did not do well all season long. We would let teams go on 20 and 30-point runs with only putting up like 2 points to answer. It's like, guys, what are we doing here? So sometimes we need that wing who can actually go and get us a bucket when Foxy's a little bit tired, Domas is getting locked up, Keegan's having an off night, Malik is injured. Like, there's so many different scenarios, right? So I'm just thinking about that, and I'm thinking about his fit alongside those guys. Ingram's shown he can play with other dudes who ball too. Like, he doesn't need to dominate and have possession of the ball 100% of the time. He doesn't need to be the main man either.
Right.
So I kind of like the idea.
My biggest fear that comes from trading for Ingram is when you're trading for Ingram, we're signing him long term. And that's and again, I think I'm not, I'll ask you this later on, but he's going to be, no matter where he goes, someone's paying him a max. And that's going to be, with New Orleans, he can get more. That's just that's how it works. When you're on your own team, you get more. But a max contract here is still, 4 years, 120-ish million now. Which wouldn't be the worst thing if we can figure out how to stay out of the second apron. We're already a first apron team, and we'll talk about, maybe we'll spend a pod just kind of elaborating on what that means. But basically, if there's 8 teams in the second apron right now, they literally can't make any moves. Like, they're strapped, they're stuck, and that's something that you just want to avoid. And Monty has kind of shown a little, and as we've noticed, like, he's shown a tendency to not really bite a bullet that he's not sure of, and that's the part that I wonder how sure he would be to get Ingram, because of, and I don't want to throw out the injury history for everybody, because yes, everybody has injury history, like Levine included, but like we said the same thing about Anthony Davis, but then he has a season where he played every game, so it's like, it's not always going to be the case. And maybe Brandon Ingram walks in here, we trade for him and he stays healthy the whole time and he contributes. That's great. I agree with how he could fit in terms of when we need a bucket and Fox is getting covered by a superior defender. Okay, give it to Brandon and let him do his thing. And I could see that. My biggest fear is the money and if he can stay healthy. But that's going to be the case with a lot of these guys. But when they're on the floor when they're on the floor, they're productive. So, I wouldn't hate it if Brandon Ingram was here, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So last guy is in the same boat, and that's, we've been linked to him before, and it was kind of the same scenario where we just couldn't. I don't think we actually could give up enough to get this guy the first time around, and then when we had a chance the second time, we didn't want to because we were on the verge of a breakout season. And this guy is Jeremy Grant. I have always been intrigued at getting Jeremy on this team. I like what he can do on both ends of the floor. I like his contract. It's not amazing.
It is a max for sure.
It's huge, right? But it's not one of those situations like Zach LaVine where he can't stay on the court. He did battle some injuries, but I think it's a product too of like, the Blazers were as bad as they were last year, and so they were just kind of trying to find reasons to put him on the injury list towards the end of it. I wouldn't be surprised if we talk about it and then Portland's like, hey, we want like, Keegan and we want Keon together, and like, because the return for Jeremy Grant's always been a lot, and it's going to continue being a lot. Because he's a really solid player, and I do believe like on this team he would be a perfect fit, especially in our starting five.
I think if, and we'll do this in a second actually, because I'll ask you, but I like Jeremy Grant too. I think he's developed so much since he's entered the league, and he's really just become this savvy veteran scorer. And he never used to be that way. He was kind of like almost a 3-and-D only, and now he can score. He's a 3-level scorer. He's an awesome defender, and he kills us literally every time we play against him. Like, he is a hard person to guard. And if he's the second option on this team, that makes it a lot easier for him and a lot easier for this team. And I could see him elevating everyone as well. And I think his contract, it is pretty tough. It's 150 mil, 160 million, but that was signed last year. So in theory, if we do trade for him, it is for the long term. The question would be, I think we could get away with doing a HB, Kevin, first round pick, Davion, and then maybe like another future first or something. That's probably what it would take. It would take our first this year, a future first, Kevin, HB, and Davion to round out the salaries. Because he's making a max contract. That's the good thing about these max contract guys, is like we can't really pair them with these rookie level deals unless it's Keegan. He's the only one that we could, but like Keon, we can't. He's just not worth them. He doesn't make enough money for it to work. So that's where it benefits us in the long run. But no, I would take Grant. I like the idea of Grant. So let me ask you, of the 4 that we mentioned, of this 4, where would you rank them 1 through 4, and how bad you would take these guys? Who's your favorite, and who's your least favorite?
I hate to say it, my favorite. All right, let me start from least favorite.
Okay.
Zach LaVine's least favorite. I don't like his contract. He's one of my favorite players. I don't like his contract. I don't like how injury prone he is. Fit wise, probably isn't the best thing, and we're locked into him at that point.
Right.
So he's probably my least. I'm gonna say next is probably Probably Jeremy Grant, just because looking at the contract and looking at what it would take to get him here, and then like I think that we'd have to give up too much,
That's
and
fair.
I'm not sure if I'm willing to do that. It would depend. But for the sake of what I think it would take, I'm going to put him at 3. Number 2 is Brandon Ingram. I would be hyped to see Brandon Ingram in sack. I'm not going to lie. And I would give up probably as much as like you would give up for Kuz if they were on the same amount of contract, like same contract. You know what I mean? Like how you feel about Kuz is how I feel about Brandon Ingram.
That's fair.
And that's kind of where I'm at with that. Number 1 is Kuzma, and it's solely to do with that contract. I'm looking at long term, this window of the 3 to 6 years. I'm going to stick to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at who we got to pay. Like, we've got Foxy coming up. That's going to be a massive one because Foxy's going to play out of his mind this year.
Yeah,
he's going to try and make $100 million this year, and that's
good.
That's not even a hot take. Yeah, go off, King. Like,
that's
please,
good for us.
do your thing. Get whatever of those awards you want to get, please, because that's only going to benefit the team. Aside from that, Murray's going to be eligible for a contract extension next year. That's something that we'd be stupid to turn down. And look, we have been so dry as an organization and a team for so long, and we are, I want to believe we are so close to kicking down that door and getting not just a legit playoff team for a few years to come, but like a legit contender.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, those top 2 guys, Kuz and Brandon Ingram, like, if we can get some kind of a deal done tomorrow that involves that 13th pick, we could be set.
I agree. At least to make an actual jump versus standing pat. For me, it would be Levine at 4, Ingram at 3, Grant at 2, and Kuz at 1. And like you said, Kuz has been my guy. I've been wanting him on this team since last free agency when we could have signed him for the same contract. But obviously we've been linked to him for the past couple of years, and I think it's a mutual interest. He said he thought he was going to Sacramento. He was prepared to come to Sac when the whole Laker trade fell apart. So I think that the idea of him coming here makes sense too. So no, it'll be interesting to see. And if we do trade that first round pick and end up with one of these dudes, great money, except for Levine. Then I'm a little worried, but like that's great. And if we use a second round pick, then we still have the options that we talked about way back when about those guys. Like I still think it's the same 3 guys: Justin Edwards, Harrison Ingram, and Pelle Larsson will probably be like the 3 guys that we'll have a shot at in the second round, and they can fill out the rest of that roster off the bench.
Yeah.
So like, well, we're going to have options, and it will be it's going to be up until we get to our pick. And because we don't know if it's going to happen beforehand or what, because some of these trades can happen right away as the clock starts ticking and other moves are made. So it'll be interesting to see when we make a move, or if we make a move, and if we pick someone, who we end up picking. And like, there's a lot of intrigue being in this spot, and it's going to come down to, how much the team trusts Monty and his decision making. And if he ends up drafting somebody, that also doesn't take away like the potential for us to trade down the line either. I think that's still an option. I just think it's going to be a different avenue that we're just not expecting. So we'll see.
Exactly. But I do believe that if you're going to make a big splash, you are most likely to get a deal done involving the 13th pick prior to drafting.
For sure.
Like that's why, like, I talk about how I really think that tomorrow, I'm telling you, I'm 95% sure that we're trading that pick. And the reason being, you can't stand pat if you're Monty McNair. You have a window. Everyone from top to bottom of the organization, the fan base, the NBA is talking about how the Kings are in win now mode. You have to have that mentality. And sorry, not in this draft. You're not going to find a win now player in this draft. I don't think at 13. I don't see any of the guys that, like, especially that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see them impacting the way that the guys that like I just talked about will in the immediate.
And that makes perfect sense. And like that could also be a signal of if they do draft somebody, that could be a signal to Monty's from Monty saying, "Hey, we believe that Keegan's going to take that next step and be the third guy. We have Malik back. Like, if we just add this complementary piece, will that be enough? Will that make the difference?" And then maybe they hopefully will, make a trade down in the trade deadline this year. But that's the thing, and that's the thing with the team building thing. Sometimes it happens all at once. You can get all these trades done in the offseason, and sometimes it takes a mid-season trade. It just Monty signing Malik signaled, a consistency with him and we got it done quick. And now it's just a matter of what we do next. And if we don't end up trading for, one of these guys, it might be something that's out of our control. And that would just be crappy, but we'll see what happens. There is a lot of intrigue. I'm ready for it, dude.
I'm stoked, man. We're gonna go to B-Dubs tomorrow. We're gonna watch the draft, and I'm gonna be on my phone way too much tomorrow because
Hell yeah.
I'm ready, dude. I'm stoked for tomorrow.
I can't wait for the first round to take 3 hours. This will be great.
No,
I can't wait, bro.
This is the first 2-day though, right?
Yeah, so it's the first time ever they're doing it in 2 days. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't get the appeal of doing it. The only reason they're doing the second round the second day is because of Bronny. So, it's whatever.
Because the second day has to be all about Bronny, right?
Yep. Yeah, so
crazy.
It'll be interesting.
If Bronny's on the board at 13, I'm taking Bronny. No. He's going to be on the board, and I'm not taking Bronny.
That'd be insane, dude. I think that'll be the intrigue of like the whole first night. It's like, oh, someone in the late round's going to bite the bullet.
If it was guaranteed to you, I'm asking you, if it was guaranteed to you that LeBron would follow Bronny wherever he gets drafted that offseason. So we draft Bronny and Bron follows a week later.
Yeah.
Would you do it?
With this roster, Bron gets to opt out, so we would sign him. The money could make sense if we did, we would have the money too. Yeah. Because like with this roster, I could totally see it happening. So it's like if that meant Bronny being our 15th man so Bron can run the show, I'm totally cool with it. And it's a 1 year, 2 year thing. Like Bron's not going to stay here forever, and we don't have to commit to Bronny. But like if it was a guarantee, yeah, I would take the opportunity. I don't see why not. Like he would never come to Sac, but if that was if that was guaranteed, I would absolutely consider it. I would say yes.
Would Bron make us a contender this year?
Yes. Absolutely. Bron makes anybody a contender. I don't care how old he is now.
In 1 year?
In 1 year, yeah. He can do that. He's that kind of player.
And he's still?
Yeah. I don't can he stay healthy and do it? Maybe not. Like he probably couldn't go to Charlotte right now and turn it all the way around, but
I never thought at any point this year the Lakers were a contender.
The same, but that's also like Bron and AD do make that difference. They are 10 wins worse without them. Like that's just
100%.
So
yeah.
that's the impact. I don't think
that's
that
fair.
I guess that's what I'm saying. At this point, Bron isn't that level where he can make it a championship contender anymore. If like the bottom of the barrel, but like he can still go in and be the best player on a team, like no problem. And on the Kings, he wouldn't necessarily have to be. So
that's a really great point because the Lakers without AD and without Bron are complete and utter dumpster fire.
Yeah.
The Kings actually have something going. So if you brought one of those guys, I mean, for this, we'll say Bron over. Yeah, I think he would make us a contender. All right,
if it was a guarantee like that in that scenario. But if it was for a maybe, no, absolutely not. Like I wouldn't bank on LeBron wanting to come here just because his son's here. He's like, I'm going to play you 4 times anyway. We'll see each other. So yeah. But no, that it'll be interesting to see who bites the bullet. And if Bronny falls to, honestly, I think the NBA is hoping that Bronny falls to the Lakers, so it keeps LeBron in LA, and that they can keep that going. That's what they want. Let's face it. And I'm okay with that. Bronny, I just feel so bad for him because he, the attention is not for his basketball talent, and that's what sucks because he's still very much a work in progress. But I also think that no matter where he goes, a team realizes that, and I think they're going to be patient with him. But in 4 years, if it doesn't pan out, then that's up to Bronny to see, what's his next move.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how much attention Bronny's gotten. Like, this is the most attention a second round pick has ever gotten. And
Yeah. Well,
it is,
yeah.
it's hard. He's got such a huge, like, he's got big shoes to fill, just because of the name.
Yeah.
And it's tough. I do wonder who's going to take him. And I wonder at what point, because I really don't see it happening tomorrow.
It's definitely, I just don't see it in the first round.
Yeah.
There was a joke. I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast, and he's like, "What if we just did like an FU to the Lakers and drafted Bronny? Just the Celtics draft Bronny, and then LeBron comes to Boston, and then wins for them. But as like for the whole Boston LA dynamic, that would be a FU type thing. But no, for Bronny, like I feel bad for him because again, it's just not about his basketball talent. Just wait till freaking Bryce comes into the league and he's an actual top 10 pick, and then it's a completely that's a different archetype to talk about. But Bronny, he is in a rare spot because not many dads, if any, I don't know of any dads who played with their sons in the NBA. That would be a first at any point in time together. So that would just it's an extremely rare thing to see. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be a story regardless. So if he can make something out of it, that's all the better for him. I'm rooting for Bronny. I don't wish any ill will on him. I think he's a good kid.
Same.
So
100%.
Yeah. All right. So do we have any final thoughts before we, head out here?
I'm standing pat, bro. We're trading that 13th pick tomorrow.
That's fair. And honestly, I'm cool either way with what happens. I'm just here for the ride. But I couldn't ignore my draft process. I wanted to do it so bad. I need to know who I'm going to stick with this year. So definitely those 5 to 8 guys I'm going to keep tabs on this year, see how they do.
For sure.
All right. This was episode 48 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook, all of our socials. The links to each are down below. And you can like, subscribe, give us a follow, tell your friends about us. And if you guys agree with our King's takes of, do you think, like Ben said, they're going to trade, or do you think we're going to pick a guy? Which guys were your favorite? We love to hear about it. So let us know. We got 2 fun days of uncertainty to kind of walk through. But the main takeaway is Malik is home, and we can figure out everything else from there, and we're happy about it.
Yeah, welcome home, Malik. We love you, bro.
That's right. I'm Marcos Conegron. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
All right, y'all. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.